Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are officially on day 7 of Navaratri. And yesterday we got to explore the feminine life cycle, the feminine cycles as a practitioner. And today is the most perfect follow-up to that as we get to dive in with a very, very special guest and one of my own teachers, Vajra Ma, who is the founder of a modality that is nothing short of life-changing. I hope every woman gets to experience this modality at some point, and it is called the Tantric Dance of Feminine Power. So we are going to dive into, wow, what a name. What is the Tantric Dance of Feminine Power? What is this modality? And Vajra Ma is here to really share her life's work with us. So a very, very warm welcome, Vajra Ma. Thank you so much for being here with us.
It's my delight. It is my delight. And thank you for creating this summit. It's just so important. And I'm so happy to be here, Halo. Thank you. Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. So the first question, and I myself am curious, is how did you get here? How did the Tantric Dance of Feminine Power happen? What was your journey into this path?
Yeah. For me, the goddess my stepping onto the path of the goddess was always through the body. And here's how it happened. It was about 1986. I got introduced by moving in next door to a woman who was she was a Middle Eastern dance teacher. She was working with women. Her name is Gina. I won't give her last name because, for various reasons of integrity. And Gina was helping women experience spontaneously more feminine knowledge, she called it, in their bodies with spontaneous movement. And I studied with her for a year and a half at this, and she turned me on to the Great Cosmic Mother book, which turned me on to the Goddess Path, the Great Cosmic Mother by Monica Sjöö and Barbara Moore. And then overlapping with that, shortly after that, I started studying Continuum with Susan Harper, which is internal movement, very subtle, and it's mostly like lie down and you're almost usually in a dream state of some kind. And that modality was founded by Emily Conrad Dowd. So these overlapped, and I found, just for a year and a half with each one of them overlapping, and I found that when I was in the Continuum class, that's where I really learned what subtle energy is. And Susan Harper gave a demonstration of moving a little one joint on your finger a little bit, and then for a while, and then feeling what happens there. You begin to feel the warmth and the buzzing and that sort of thing. So I really tapped into the subtle energies that way. And in the Continuum class with Susan Harper, I started having spontaneous experiences. We'd also sound sometimes very gently. I was having spontaneous experiences of the goddess because of the studies I was doing. And it was like, I would go, yeah. The first experience was, yeah, yeah. These sounds were coming through, and I went, wait a minute, that's Yamaya, and an oceanic feeling in my body, etc. And I hungered to have goddess-oriented experiences, direct experiences of the goddess powers, individuals, their signature energetics, who they are, but no one was doing it. It wasn't happening for other people in Continuum. It wasn't really happening in the classes with Gina in quite that way, not in that subtle way. So I started holding circles with that intention. And it took me 5 years after that to actually start teaching in 1992 the Tantric Dance of Feminine Power, or trying to teach it. Now, Gina called her work Tantric Dance, and I want to honor her for that. And what happened was, what I was experiencing shaped and shifted enough that I felt I could call my work Tantric Dance. And it wasn't quite the same as what she was doing, but she really gave me the threads for witnessing and feeling the feminine knowledge, the feminine innate knowing that was coming through a woman's body. And so the Continuum work helped me develop what I call the breath stretch, which is a bodily exploration, You know, it's not the tantric dance of feminine power per se, but it's an exploration of the different qualities in our body and connecting with the womb, the heart, oceanic serpent movement, etc. There's 1,000 ways to explore our female body that way. And then we would go into the tantric dance proper. And that's how it happened. So I want to honor those teachers. And another woman who was very influential with me in energetic bodily work was Ruth Gould Goodman, who is still working in Venice, California. And she's a masteress of movement and conscious body awareness. So I honor my teachers there for that.
Well, it's so beautiful. The first thing that stuck out to me was what you said in the very beginning about the goddess path, the feminine path being in the body. And I think that's something that's so desperately missing in what we see as modern religion, or kind of, you know, we're taught to divorce ourselves from the body. And even in some Eastern traditions, we're taught to kind of transcend the body and its urges or its experiences. And I've always, you know, the deeper I go into these paths, even the more seated practices, like the body is the matrix of awakening and power. And so I feel like through your modality, you know, what's so intriguing to me is that you weren't necessarily in these traditions directly, and yet you tapped a universal experience of her power without necessarily the context of these traditions, which has now been verified, right, by other practitioners. It's just incredible. So
yeah, it is, and it's. I feel deeply moved by you saying that and acknowledging that, and for all women to understand that, and men tangentially they can be taught, you know, but women like just tap right in a way that is very natural and innate for us, if we're guided properly and if we focus that way. And so for me, it has always been the direct knowledge through the body. And so then when I would start to read Tantric Tibetan Buddhism, I was very influenced by Miranda Shaw's book, Passionate Enlightenment, Women in Tantric Buddhism. And I used her book until it was in shreds in my teaching. So those inspirations, you know, that traditional knowledge, but I didn't study with anyone traditionally, but because I was coming to this directly through the body knowing, which is where it all comes from anyway. See, it all has to channel into the human body. That's where the knowledge, like a duh. And because I was having those direct experiences, when I would read something esoteric, I would understand it because I already had the Rosetta Stone through my own body, the key, you know. And so I want to acknowledge that the people that I read their information, you know, that fed into my teaching. And the other thing about the teaching, you know, and you know this, Halo, is your students pull it out of you. And so, you know, it's a loop. It's like, it's in the field, and what's in the field of the student, their questions, their desires, whether it's spoken or not, comes into the field, and the teacher can feel it if we're connected, and we address that. And that's how the dance really developed. Because in 1992, when I started, from 92 to 95, it was just like an explosion. Because I tried to teach something like it earlier, and I was like, I didn't know what I was doing, and it had to gestate. All of this study had to gestate, you know, it's a process. You can't force it. And so I say that it took 3 ingredients for this practice to come through. It took the Divine Mother, of course, her wisdom, her knowledge, the goddess. It took someone to receive it. That's myself, and others to receive it and feed back in the loop, you know, the students. It wouldn't have happened without the women that for some reason trusted me in those early years and were juiced by it. And, you know, and we would have these classes where it was like, oh my God, all this came through, goddess. Oh my goddess, this came through. We couldn't possibly get any more. This is amazing. The next week, the same thing would happen. It's like, oh, you know, so it was revealing itself through the female collective circle. And my job was to be open, and I call, the mantle of the teacher, the channel of the teacher, listening and feeling. And it wasn't until I had to tell that woman, okay, now here's how you can go deeper. Here's that, some of them just wouldn't get it at all. You're going, what am I going to say to her? It's like, find that golden thread that's there and nurture that, right? So you find that and you give that to her, but you have to hear it. You have to sense it, and it has to be revealed to you. So it's really very much, you could call it channeling, in its own way, and as all creativity is and all good teaching really is. So that's how it evolved. So I'm very grateful for my students. And, to teach means you get to learn. That's what I love about teaching, is I learn. So yeah.
I could not agree more with that sentiment. When you have to, like, it's one thing to be in the experience, but now you're like, oh, I have to actually articulate this in a way that I can transmit the experience to another person. It's an art form.
Yeah.
So for those who are here, speaking of that articulation, for those who are here, like, how would you describe that? We're not actually doing the tantric dance of feminine power in this particular session, but how would you describe what the modality is?
Yeah. I'll just do like a talk through as if I'm entering into the dance. I start in complete stillness and emptiness. And of course, emptiness means the plenum, all possibilities. It's not non, it is very full. But to be still, standing, completely relaxed, nothing on ready, nothing's tense, and going into devotion, into the heart, with devotional intention and reverence. Because I'm about to worship the Divine Mother as the subtle, in her subtle form, moving through my body. The sensations I feel are her, and I'm holding them with reverence. So I begin in that stillness in the heart, and I drop down my consciousness. I drop down, down, down to the womb, and I let the spanda, the underlying tremoring vibration of the universe, the Om, you might say, I let it gather and increase in my womb until I feel an impulse to move. And I move starting in the pelvis. And if a woman doesn't feel that, because, feeling contact with the lower chakra is much harder than the upper chakras, I just tell her to go ahead and just move the pelvis, begin the movement. And we receive everything in the dance as pleasure. So feel the pleasure of that movement of the pelvis, of the hip, of the arms as they come up. Eventually the energy rises and the arms start to move and go into shapes. Feel the pleasure of the stretch of a muscle. Feel the pleasure of breathing. We want the breath to be natural, uninterfered with, right? And we're not using the breath. We're not using the body. We're continually listening. So as that movement begins, and the underlying pattern of the dance is the serpent wave. It's the serpent wave. It's the undulation. And everything happens through that wave. And that is natural in sexuality, right? You arch yourself, this is like, it turns you on, it feels good. And it's the natural flow of the universe. Waves, ocean waves, sound waves, light waves, everything's, moving that way. So we are tapping into that with the movement, and we let the body then, through that pleasure, always letting it register as pleasure, staying connected with the womb, letting the consciousness stay with the womb as the energy rises through the body and circulates through the body. And this is very key now, not letting it move out of the body. It is the absolute key. We absorb it. We keep absorbing it. It keeps involuting in, and without stopping it. So it involutes in and out, and through this deep inner space connection is how we connect with the cosmos, which are also, Tantra says, within us, of course. The moon, the sun, the stars, they're all in our body, and it's all enfolded in us. And so as we continue to absorb the energy and the power as it increases, rather than letting it out with jerks or siphon it off with their breath. No, 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 no. you gotta increase your capacity to hold it. And you do that by dilating within. It's like a hose, rather than more power is coming through and it's gotta go like this, but you have to dilate that hose, that inner space, and keep absorbing it. And that's how we catch the frequencies. That's how we embody, the frequencies. A frequency will start to come in like serpent or lion or tiger. Tiger is different than serpent than lion. Or bird, some kind of bird, or the highest frequency that I'm aware of is dragon. Dragon. And so and it can be an unnamed frequency. You don't know what it is, but the frequency is totally connected to the biocircuitry of the body. So as I'm moving, and I'm like this is one biocircuitry. I don't know where it's going to go because I'm continually following. I'm letting it shape itself. It's like, that's the receptivity that's key to the dance. I am receptive to where it wants to go. It is revealing itself. And as my hand comes down here, I can feel it in front of my third eye, and my left hand is down over by my heart. And then where does it want to go? Oh, it's going like this. And then, my eyes are closed. They were closed. And as images come up, stories might come up of my life, whatever. Okay, they're fine, but I keep staying with the subtle sensation and the pleasure, because that's the closest to reality. That's the closest to source in the body, is, not the story, not the visuals, but the bodily knowing, the direct contact. And then everything else unfolds from there. Well, that's it in a nutshell. A great big nutshell. I love getting into it,
Oh gosh, you're speaking of it and I'm feeling it in my body, having experienced it myself.
Yeah.
And I think what is so important that you shared, because first of all, through this dance, we're tapping into, like you said, universal energy. Like there's a way that when we approach it, we have to approach it naked. And that's actually like, it's just for those of you watching, this is a formless dance. There's no official structure. There is kind of a way that you set people up to begin. But once you're in it, it's structureless, which, okay, ecstatic dance, blah, blah, blah. We think that's easy. It's not easy in this dance because we have to shed all, the mind tries to jump in, patterns in the body want to take over. It's like you have to continually shed all the extra, in my experience, to actually find that complete surrender and receptivity to let the power move. And then what you said about the discharging, I have found this not only in the dance, but in just tantric sadhana. It's amazing because these are paths of power. And they're specifically paths, especially for women, where we've had thousands of years of suppression, oppression, like not being able, this is like a reclamation really to me of our
Yes.
And yet so often, I'm getting chills saying this, so often our initial impulse as we cultivate more power is to discharge or to fall asleep or to, we have these crazy internal mechanisms that block us from holding more power, and I think what I found to be so incredibly powerful about this dance is there's not a lot of complication around it. It's not this big elaborate ritual or puja that this happens and that happens. And, it's just like, no, we're going straight there. No detours, no, just immediately plug right in and that power. It's amazing. But then how you said letting it infold, not unfold, but infold inside of us and to hold that and grow the capacity, because I think that's what we're trying to do here, just in general as practitioners, is how can we have more and more capacity to hold power, which results in true power anyway, results then in wisdom and compassion and feeling connected to the all that is and stewarding our earth, you know, all of these things. So
All of it. That was brilliant. That was so beautifully said. It's just like, I go, yeah. That was just gorgeous. And I'll lay you 10 to 1 that the women watching this and our men are gonna feel it. They're gonna feel it, the truth of this, and you know, ignite something in the core of their body, because you're right, we go straight to the core of our power. And like you said, things have to fall away. So it's very exacting without being mentally exact. It's exacting through feeling and allowing and receiving. And yeah, watching for those mental interferences and that discharging and all of that is just, you just expressed that so beautifully. You know, let's start dancing.
I know, I'm feeling that. I'm like, woo. Yeah.
Yeah. And what's beautiful is that in a class, even through Zoom, I was like 2015, I thought, oh, I can never do this through Zoom. It's like, you can't do this. But yes, you can. There's a great measure of transmission that does happen through digital, through electronics. But it's not the same as being in person. But it's a close enough second to be really worthwhile. But what happens is that we, in a class, whether on Zoom or live, the collective circle, the deeper consciousness gets activated in everyone, and that amplifies the experience for everyone. Right? It's the collective power, and yeah, and so that's the beauty of coming together in group, in circle to do this kind of work, you know. And we get that helps us get past the obfuscations and dive deeper into, or be more open, more naked, you know. Well, naked is like pregnant. You're either naked or you're not. You're either pregnant or you're not. Let's get more open to what's really encoded in our bodies, you know, to ourselves as the unfoldment of the universe. And for women, of course, this is a female-based practice because we have the womb. And our bodies, we are the great cosmic womb of all creation is unfolded in our body. And if we've had a hysterectomy, we still have the imprint. So women, please know that. You have the imprint, you have the intelligence there inherent in you. And men are at there's this saying in Tantra, what a woman can ascertain in one day may take a man a year. And so we have this tremendous capacity as females, and that's so important. That's what you're bringing through. One of the things you're bringing through in your summit is this is the truth, and let's just know that about ourselves as women.
Yeah, I feel like more and more women are drawn to these paths because, you know, not to get too caught into, gender polarity or all that, because ultimately in Tantra, we're merging and we're finding that which is beyond duality, that which is beyond polarity. But there is a way that these traditions, these lineages, whatever they are, whether it's Tantric dance of feminine power or Sri Vidya or, like this, the lineages are alive and they're a living body. And when they come into contact with different bodies, it's like an alchemy that interacts, right? So the way the lineage or teachings interact with this body is going to be slightly different or very different than how it, and consciousness, not just the body, than how it will with yours. So there's a way that, it's an alchemy. And so when these teachings and lineages are coming through female bodies, it's a different thing. And I think we've had, centuries perhaps of these teachings coming through male bodies. And I feel like there's actually a shift happening now where there are more and more women who are kind of holding these traditions and holding them really well. right? And we've also seen ways that there have been imbalances of power, and so there's a beautiful thing happening right now, and I feel like this is all a part of it, and what you've tapped into is a huge piece of it. And something that came through when you were talking earlier is this way that we have to let go to go into the dance. And, I think we live in a society, I can say this very much from my own experience, this level of feeling like I have to hold so much, like,
Yeah.
the rent every month, and the complexity of being a woman or just a human in our modern times, and the amount of holding. Like sometimes I find my body and I'm like, wow, my shoulders are up to here right now.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And those opportunities to let go, but the immense amount, this is something I feel like I'd love to hear you speak on, but that, as we're coming back to the mother in a deeper way, as more and more people are called to the feminine face of the divine, the amount of trust that's required,
Mm,
right? To let go
mm.
and surrender and let our will be her will. I feel like this is so inherent in the dance. So if there's anything you have to say around that, I would love to.
Yeah. I flashed on as you're saying that was the fear of letting go can be, we don't want to feel our wounds. We don't want to feel, we're very wounded as women. We've been ogled at. We hold, our sexuality, our female form has been ogled at, and we're in basic danger in this world in a very real way, which we can put protection around us and we'll be okay. But there's a lot of danger in being in the female body, and a lot of denigration. And so and then just as a human being, we might have a lot of anger that is repressed. And so this brings up the point of the transmutation of of afflictive emotions. Maybe one of the reasons we don't want to let go is we're afraid of our anger, we're afraid of our pain. And so I tell women, like, we always start, we're not going to negate our negative feelings, or maybe we're in grief, or maybe, things are happening in our life when we come to do one of the dance, we come to do the dance, the witness dance, and we don't negate that, but we don't go into it as story. We hold it in the larger chalice of the bigger picture of we are essentially, we trust. We are essentially unscathed. The soul is unscathed. We come here, we incarnate, and there's the essence of us that is not harmed by anything. And we want to hold our dance in that bigger, so it's like this big chalice, and here's this gnarly thing that's in our life. It's like, oh, we feel, well, it gets to move around, it gets to flow, it gets to tap into this ocean of bliss that is in this chalice, you see. And we hold it that way, we will not get stuck in the pain. I'll share an experience I had. I knew I was going to have, back in the 90s, I knew I was going to have to put my dog down. She couldn't walk anymore. And I was really grieving about that. And I haven't put her down yet. I had people come, vet come to the house to do it, in the house. But I was grieving that, and I was feeling that. As I did the dance, as a teacher of this practice in front of my students, I would always dance. I'd have to be naked like everybody else. I'm not the big know-it-all. You're always going into this, from receptivity and what is new and what is fresh and how can I, deepen and open more. And I felt grief. And actually, wait a minute, I've got two things. Okay, I'll go with this one. I felt grief, and I let the grief move through my body. As I started to dance, it was there. I didn't negate it, but I didn't hang on to it. And I trusted, I'm letting it move, and I'm letting it register as pleasure as much as I could, to feel is its own pleasure, the sensations of grief as it moves. And as that circulated, by the end of the dance, I had this epiphany that said, you will have joy in this death. And I did. And when she crossed over, that weekend I was going to visit my family, my family, and I thought I couldn't go because I'm going to miss so much grief. No, I had joy, and I felt this light around me, and I felt like she was with me, my beautiful Tasha, my shepherd husky mix, and she was with me in some transcendent form, you know, more than we think of as a dog. You know, they're much more than we think they are. We all are. And I had joy, and that was an example of, you know, embracing something that's difficult, that's happening in your life, but holding it in that larger chalice, you know. Um, and it transmutes afflictive emotions. It takes us into love. You know, love is really the core of this dance. The mother is love, unconditional.
Yeah. I remember the last time when I came on retreat with you, and, you know, I'm coming out the other side of these knee injuries, and there was a lot, you know, it was an edge for me to step into that space, you know, as a trained dancer, even to be, you know, I'm like, what if I hurt myself, you know, like having a difficult time just letting go in the dance, because I'm like, well, what if I let go and then I actually hurt myself doing this or something? And you said something so brilliant. You just reminded me to follow the pleasure again. Right. And I'd gotten so attached to the pain. And it was like that was kind of this like switch for me, you know, but I'd love to hear more from you around like, okay, so pain's part of the human experience. We go into the dance, we might, as we're going in the body, we might find some pain. Like, what do we, I think you kind of explained this already, but just letting it like kind of feeling it as pleasure. But what would you say around that, like pleasure pain dichotomy and being that kind of finding the pleasure in the pain? Or yeah, I just like to
It's
tease out a little bit more on that duality pair.
yeah, that's a really good question. It's like, first of all, and what I also could have said to you then is like, if we are listening and letting the body lead the way, it will not hurt itself. It won't. And you know, we override, and that's why we injure ourselves, you know. So let's say you start to dance and you feel, oh, that hurts. Oh, well, soften and listen to the pain, you know, and we can drop in the question. Here's where the mental part comes into the dance, the intellect. We can say, how can I go deeper? Or how can I deal with that pain I'm feeling? If it seems like it's stopping us, what needs to happen? Is a really good question. What needs to happen? Oh, I need to let the breath, I was holding my breath. I need to like soften that and slow down. You know, whatever it is, your body, your consciousness will tell you what to do. Because, you know, pain is a message, a loving message from the body that's saying, hey, you're blocked here. You're stopping the flow. Hey, you need to listen. And if you listen, it'll flow into healing. It'll flow into allowing the natural flow of energies to come. And so that comes back to the trust you were talking about, you know, to trust and listen. So that's kind of what I would, and it would depend on each woman, what that pain is or what's going on. How she can, how her body, what her body, her deep consciousness will tell her to do, you know, to deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like faced with what we're facing as a humanity globally, you know, just there's so much moving, you know, here in the US, we have the elections coming up next month, you know, there's so many reasons for the mind to not trust. You know what I mean? And so what I love about this practice is it's like a practice of trust. It's a practice of letting go. It's a practice. And I feel like you know, as we awaken to the mother more and more, for me, in my experience, I found this to be one of the cornerstones because her path it's not, faith isn't optional. I feel like on the path of the mother, it's like, it's almost a requirement. Because she's the one weaving all of this, right?
Yeah.
So can I, instead of, can I, and
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
dance is just so incredible for that.
And it nourishes this. It's like nourishment. It's like eating food, you know. It's like, I'm hungry, I need to eat some food. I'm thirsty, I need to drink some water. I'm in angst, I need to do the dance. And I have another example that I was almost flipped over to when I was talking about my Tasha, my beautiful shepherd husky miss, and that addresses exactly what you're speaking to. And that was, I was dancing and I had the tapestry behind me of Durga. Speaking of Durga, with all of her many weapons, and she has this beautiful smiling face. And I was feeling so much grief and anguish about the world, you know, at that time. It was really, we feel it. And it's like, I was feeling pissed. How can you? I was thinking, how can you just smile and you're always in bliss? The goddess is always in bliss. She's beyond all this. She's got all these weapons, you know. And it's like, I was like really angry, you know, and I wanted to just hang on to that, you know, like I'm in grief, you know, and I'm suffering about the world. But I had to dance. Okay, well, the first rule is you go into pleasure, right? Oh, how can I do that? And so I kept bringing myself back to the movement and the pleasure and the pleasure. And, you know, I couldn't understand how she could be in bliss when all this is happening. And let it go, just surrender. I kept saying, just surrender, surrender. And what happened was, you know, Halo, was from deep within, I felt, what I saw was I had an imagery that was appropriate to have. I didn't go off into a story. On one side is the charnel ground, you know, just destruction and nuclear devastation, and there it is, just everything is dead. And the other side, a beautiful garden of, you know, sweet fragrance and flowers. And I felt Kali. This is after I'd, you know, struggled with surrendering and staying in pleasure. I felt Kali's voice rise up from my womb all the way up in here, and she said, "I am your mother. I give you your desire. You choose. Do you want the garden or do you want the charnel ground?" You know, she says, "I love you. I give you what you desire." You know,
Mm.
that shut me up. You know, I mean, that was
It's so true.
that was, thank you, Ma. Yeah, you know, that was an epiphany.
Yeah.
And it's not that I don't stay there. You know, I go into like fear or you know, concern but I can go back to that direct experience that I had and know that that is the truth. And like you said, the mother's weaving it all. And I can trust my great mother.
Yeah.
And women, those who've had, you know, difficult experiences with your mother, just know that this mother is the one you've always wanted.
Yeah.
Okay, so please open to that, and don't let a conflictive experience with your own mother, because there's many of those, because our mothers have been raised in patriarchy and they've had to suppress themselves, you know, and we are here now with this tremendous knowledge and blessing and freedom to change that, to transform that, and to heal our own mother line as we heal ourselves. And as each one of us steps into our own healing and awakening, it makes it easier for the other women around us to do so. And of course, our brothers and all our relations. You know, it's a blessing to the whole earth, to our earth mother who's constantly giving to us and holding us in this earth walk. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
So beautiful. Thank you. Yeah. So I have one more question before we close together, and that is, you know, as we're drawn towards these paths, whether it's tantric dance of feminine power or the more traditional tantric systems, what would you say are some of the pitfalls or the things to watch out for? Like, for instance, I'm in the dance and the mind comes, or something like that, but just what would you share to kind of be mindful of, and what advice would you give those who are newer to these paths?
Yeah, these paths in general, or specifically the tantric dance? what is you?
I'm kind of putting them all in, you know, because I feel like they're related. I feel like it's kind of, the approach is so similar in my mind. So I think
Yeah.
whatever you share could apply to both.
I think covered some of that in this whole trust and allowance and trusting the body to guide us, trusting what is innate within the heart. The heart is where we need to go in this evolution with the earth. As she's raising her frequency, we're raising ours, and it is to live in the heart, which means beyond judgment. Because in the heart and the body, there is no real paradox. All the conflict, it dissolves into the direct experience of oneness. But pitfalls are therefore denying that, not being willing, making the choice not to surrender, and being aware of that as a choice. And then, you know what? If you're going to choose that at any given time in your progress, just be aware of it and say, it's okay. I'm not going any further, and be gentle with yourself and don't judge yourself. I think judgment is one of the major pitfalls and one of the major tenets, if you want, of the goddess is be on the goddess path. To awaken is to be in non-judgment, to just recognize that we are all from the same source, the great womb of the mother, the dark and the light of the great mother, and we are all of equal value. So yeah, the pitfall is interference of any kind. Does that make sense? Does that cover the ground?
Complete sense. Yeah. And just, thinking of judgment, I'm like, we're all craving communion. And yet we have all these mechanisms that we reinforce separation. And like you're saying about the heart is what dissolves all of that. I think that was just the most perfect, beautiful advice.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's one other, what was I just flashed on it? What was it? Oh, it's gonna go. Well, I think enough has been said.
Shema. So thank you. I want to just thank you so much for coming here and sharing about the tantric dance of feminine power, Vajra Ma. It's been like one of the kind of, like, I feel like the other pieces of my path didn't make as much sense until I found the tantric dance of feminine power, if that makes sense. Like, it just dropped me right in. Oh, this is the thing that we're trying to do in all these other ways, but this is the thing,
Yes.
And
it's the Rosettal Stone. It's the direct knowledge. It's encoded in our body. And once we get there, all the other stuff we can translate and understand all the esoteric or other practices that are serving that.
Exactly. Yeah. And this could be a whole other conversation, but I just can't help but dropping the nugget in here as someone who studied classical Indian dance that evolved from, very rigid, very structured dance, but so beautiful and so deep. And so, there's so much power within that dance, even as this very structured dance. But tracing it in my own studies of like the temple dance traditions, the Devadasi traditions, and when I found the tantric dance of feminine power, I was like, this is what women were doing in the temples, maybe not verbatim, but that connecting to the energy. Like we know in India and in many of the kind of temple traditions, and just in India in general, I'm totally spacing the name, but where people will go into trance and their bodies will be taken by deities, right? And the deities' energies will start moving through them. They might start speaking in tongues. They might, so this is something like what you've tapped into is something that I feel like has been happening all over the world in different capacities of can I, as in the ego complex, what we call the ahamkara in the tantric and yogic traditions, can that get out of the way to let that larger energy that is her, or we could say him, it's just Shiva, whatever, but in this case, her, come into us and fill us fully. And so for me, it's just, I just want to reiterate that the tantric dance of feminine power, it made Odissi make more sense in certain ways. It made my tantric practices make more sense. So I just want to honor that. And for those of you who are here in witness, it's a tricky thing to, talk about because it's such a direct experience thing. And so if you look in this email, we actually have an invitation for you to get to experience this directly with Vajra Ma at the end of the month. So we hope you'll join us for that, because it will all make so even more sense then to have that direct experience of this incredible practice. So
more sense. Can I add one more thing?
Yes, of course.
That the scripture I love the most is in the Tripura Rahasya. The goddess says, worship me as your innermost self.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're doing in the dance. And that's what we're aiming to do in all the practices, the traditional practices, to worship her as our innermost self, no separation. Yeah.
Mm.
And yet we also call out to her out there. It's both. As a human being, it's both, and it's beautiful. Yeah. Thank you so much, Halo.
You're so welcome. Thank you for being here. It's really such an honor. And thank you to everyone who's participating. And we will see you tomorrow for day 8 as we dive into the alchemy of silence. All right. Have a beautiful day, everyone.